You don't expect to see a familiar television face walking into a detention center to turn himself in. And yet, that's exactly what happened. A respected actor, decades in the industry, a career built on playing authority figures, mentors, men you're supposed to trust. And then suddenly, a mugshot, charges, and a story that no one was prepared for. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. What would make someone drive nearly 2,000 miles, lawyer already hired, knowing that the moment they arrive, the cameras, the headlines, and the public judgment will follow? And why, just hours before surrendering, would that same person look into a camera and say, "They're all lies"? That contradiction is where this story begins. Timothy Busfield is not a fringe name. He's been part of American television culture for decades. To many viewers, he's recognizable, familiar, almost comforting, which is exactly why the events of mid-January sent such a shockwave through both Hollywood and the public. On January 13th, Busfield turned himself in at a New Mexico detention center after an arrest warrant was issued days earlier. The warrant outlined allegations involving minors. Serious allegations. The kind that immediately change how a name is spoken online. The kind that don't just threaten a career, but permanently reshape a life. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Before handcuffs, before booking, before the mugshot was released, Busfield recorded a video statement that would circulate rapidly across the internet. In it, he didn't hedge. He didn't soften his words. He didn't suggest misunderstanding. He flatly denied everything. He said he did nothing wrong. He said the allegations were lies. He said he would fight. And he said he knew he would be exonerated. That confidence raises questions. Big ones. Was this defiance or desperation? Was it strategy or belief? And why speak publicly at all when most attorneys would advise absolute silence? As details began to emerge through police statements and reporting, another layer of tension settled in. Because this case wasn't unfolding quietly. The mugshot was released. The charges were named. The alleged timeline pointed back to a television set. A workplace. A space that's supposed to be tightly controlled, supervised, and safe. And that's when the public reaction fractured. Some people immediately assumed the worst. Others urged restraint, reminding everyone that allegations are not convictions. And in the middle of it all sat one unavoidable truth. Once a warrant like this exists, nothing ever goes back to normal. So why now? Why did this case surface when it did? And what exactly is contained inside that arrest warrant that led authorities to issue it in the first place? Because as unsettling as the headline already is, the details behind how this case formed, where it allegedly began, and what investigators say happened next, push this story into even darker territory. And that's where we're going next. So what exactly pushed this story from whispers into a full-blown criminal case? According to authorities, it began quietly. No flashing lights. No dramatic arrest caught on camera. Just paperwork, interviews, and eventually, a decision that would change everything. On January 9th, an arrest warrant was issued. Not a summons. Not a request to appear. A warrant. That detail matters. A warrant means investigators believe they had enough information to justify taking someone into custody. It means a judge reviewed what was presented and signed off. And once that happens, there are only two paths forward. You're picked up, or you turn yourself in. For days later, Busfield chose the second option. On January 13th, he arrived at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Albuquerque and surrendered to authorities. No resistance. No attempt to delay. The process moved quickly. Booking, processing, and then, as a standard procedure, a mugshot was taken and later released by the detention center. This wasn't a leak. It wasn't paparazzi. It was official. The statement confirming the surrender came from the Albuquerque Police Department, which made clear that Busfield was taken into custody on the warrant issued days earlier. The charges listed were severe: 2 counts of criminal sexual contact of a minor and 1 count of child abuse. Those words carry weight, heavy weight. But here's where things get complicated and where many viewers get confused. Charges are not convictions. A warrant is not a verdict. And a mugshot, as damaging as it can be to someone's reputation, is not proof of guilt. It's proof that the legal system has moved into its next phase. Still, public perception rarely waits for courtrooms. The moment the mugshot surfaced, reactions exploded. Social media filled with shock, anger, disbelief, and certainty from people who had only just learned the name hours earlier. Others pushed back, asking why everyone seemed ready to decide the outcome before a single court appearance. And then there's the question that keeps hovering over all of this. Why surrender so quickly if you believe you're innocent? Some legal experts say voluntary surrender can be strategic. It shows cooperation. It can influence bail decisions. It can signal confidence. Others argue it's simply the least damaging option once a warrant exists. But Busfield didn't just surrender quietly. He had already gone on record, publicly, saying the allegations were lies. He described getting the call, hiring a lawyer, driving thousands of miles to face what he called false accusations head-on. That creates a strange tension. A man saying he's been wronged, walking directly into a jail. So what did investigators believe happened that justified issuing the warrant in the first place? What information was persuasive enough to cross that legal threshold? And how does a case like this even get built when the alleged events trace back years? Because buried inside the warrant isn't just a list of charges. It's a narrative, a timeline, and a setting that raises even more troubling questions. And once you understand where authorities say this all began, the story becomes even harder to ignore. If the arrest warrant answered how this case moved forward, it left a much harder question hanging in the air. Where did this allegedly begin? According to investigators, the allegations trace back to a place that rarely draws attention once the cameras stop rolling. A television set, a controlled environment, a workplace governed by rules, supervision, schedules, and layers of professional oversight. The set of the cleaning lady. This is where the story becomes deeply unsettling, not because of graphic details, but because of the implications. The warrant alleges unlawful sexual conduct involving two 11-year-old twins. Their identities were withheld, as required by law. The allegations surfaced through their parents, who later spoke with investigators. And according to the warrant, the children allegedly met Busfield while he was working as a director during the show's second season in 2022. That detail alone raises difficult questions. Film and television sets are not casual spaces. They are structured, regulated. People are credentialed. Call sheets track who is present and when. Minors are typically accompanied, supervised, and subject to additional protections, which leads to an obvious, uncomfortable question. How does an allegation like this even form in an environment designed to prevent exactly this kind of thing? Authorities have not publicly released specific details, and that absence has only fueled speculation. But what's clear is that investigators believe the allegations were serious enough to justify criminal charges. And that belief didn't emerge overnight. These cases often involve interviews, corroboration, timelines, and difficult conversations that unfold over months or longer. The parents' involvement is central here. According to the warrant, they reported concerns after learning of interactions between their children and Busfield. What was said? What was observed? What raised alarms? Those elements remain largely sealed from the public, but their existence is what pushed the case forward. And this is where public reaction fractured even further. Some people immediately focused on the setting, arguing that accusations tied to a professional set should be easy to disprove. Others argued the opposite, pointing out that proximity and perceived authority can complicate boundaries in subtle ways. The debate became heated, emotional, and often detached from the facts actually available. Meanwhile, media coverage intensified. Outlets like People reported on the charges and the warrant, sticking closely to official language. Others amplified the shock factor. And then there was the viral spread of Busfield's denial, obtained by TMZ, which added another layer of confusion. Because here's the contradiction no one could ignore. Investigators say there's enough to charge. Busfield says there's nothing there at all. No misunderstanding. No gray area. Just lies, according to him. So which version will stand up when tested? And what happens when a case built on allegations collides with a defendant who is openly challenging it before trial? Because just hours before he surrendered, Busfield made a decision that most defendants never do. He spoke, directly, emotionally, and publicly. And what he said in that moment didn't calm the storm. It intensified it. So why speak at all? That's the question many people asked the moment the video surfaced. Just hours before surrendering, Timothy Busfield looked into a camera and chose a path most defense attorneys actively discourage. He didn't wait for court. He didn't let paperwork speak for him. He spoke first. And he didn't hedge. He said he got the call. He said he hired a lawyer immediately. He said he drove 2,000 miles to Albuquerque. And then he said the words that instantly split public opinion down the middle. They're all lies. I did not do anything to those little boys. I'm going to fight this. And I'm going to be exonerated. That level of certainty is rare. Some viewers saw confidence. Others heard panic wrapped in resolve. Legal analysts pointed out the risk. Anything said publicly can be scrutinized, replayed, and potentially used to challenge credibility later. So again, the question comes back. Why say anything? One theory is strategy. By denying the allegations early and loudly, Busfield may be attempting to shape public perception before silence takes over. Another theory is emotional impulse. When someone believes their entire life is about to collapse, restraint can vanish. And then there's the human factor. This isn't just about a courtroom. It's about reputation, family, legacy. Busfield is married to Melissa Gilbert, another recognizable figure whose name is now inevitably pulled into headlines she did not choose. While she has not made public statements related to the case, the pressure surrounding families in moments like this is immense. But the legal process doesn't slow down for emotions. After surrendering, Busfield was booked on the warrant. Fingerprints, processing, temporary confinement. The mechanics are procedural, almost cold, but each step carries symbolic weight. This is where a case stops being theoretical and becomes real. What comes next is the part most people don't understand. There will be court appearances, likely an arraignment, decisions about bail or release conditions, motions filed quietly behind the scenes, evidence that the public may never see in full, and a timeline that moves far slower than the internet would like. That gap between accusation and adjudication is dangerous territory. It's where rumors thrive, where partial information becomes certainty, where denial is either seen as bravery or audacity, depending on who's watching. And here's the contradiction at the center of it all. Busfield says there is nothing there. Investigators say there is enough to proceed. Both cannot be true forever. At some point, one version will collide with evidence, testimony, and scrutiny under oath. Until then, the story hangs in an uncomfortable balance. Because the next phase of this case won't play out on camera or in viral clips. It will unfold in filings, hearings, and decisions that quietly determine whether this ends as an accusation that collapses or a case that moves forward with devastating consequences. And the next court date may answer a question that changes everything. Will this fight even make it to trial? So now everything narrows to one unavoidable reality. This story is no longer about headlines. It's no longer about viral clips or mugshots or speculation spiraling out of control. From this point forward, it belongs to the legal system. Quiet rooms, formal language, evidence weighed line by line, and a process that doesn't care how fast the internet has already made up its mind. When we circle back to the beginning, that first unsettling image becomes even heavier. A man voluntarily turning himself in. A man insisting he's innocent. A man facing charges that carry some of the most serious implications imaginable. That contrast is the core tension that refuses to resolve itself neatly. And that's why this case matters. Not because of celebrity alone, but because it forces uncomfortable questions into the open. How quickly do we decide who someone is based on an accusation? How much weight should public denial carry before a trial even begins? And what responsibility do we all share in waiting for facts rather than feeding on outrage? There are people watching this story who feel rage. Others feel disbelief. Some feel confusion. And some feel nothing but exhaustion from seeing yet another name dragged into a scandal they never expected. All of those reactions exist at once, colliding in the same space. But the truth is, none of those reactions will determine the outcome. That will be decided in courtrooms, not comment sections. Through testimony, not trending topics. Through procedures designed to protect both the accused and those making allegations, even when the process feels painfully slow. And here's the part that lingers. Cases like this don't end cleanly. Even if charges are dropped, reputations are altered forever. Even if a case proceeds, justice is rarely as simple as people want it to be. There is no rewind button, no reset. Only outcomes that ripple outward, affecting families, careers, and lives that may never fully recover. For now, the only honest position is uncertainty. An arrest warrant exists. A denial exists. Allegations exist. And until the next court appearance, everything else lives in the space between them. So as this story continues to unfold, the most important thing isn't choosing sides. It's paying attention, watching carefully, and remembering that the loudest moments in a case are rarely the most important ones. Because the real turning point hasn't happened yet. And when it does, it won't arrive with a siren or a headline. It will arrive quietly.